just first of all to say that I agree totally with Deputy MacDonald that the crowds outside the gate today are quite serious in supporting the motion that will be brought before the House in the afternoon, which has joint support across many parties, but of course not across all parties in this House, because there is an ideological difference between the parties in this House. But what that protest does have is the support of a coalition of forces from all of the NGOs dealing with the housing issue, all of the trade unions, all of the smaller political parties, all of the housing associations, and indeed many academics and other bodies. And I think it will be worth your while listening to that message. 50 years ago, the civil rights movement in Derry took to the streets. It's actually 50 years this month. And they brought out caravans and barricades and blocked the streets over the question of the right to housing. And they got the right to housing. So those on your side of the House who say protests don't build houses, they actually do, because if you keep protesting and keep making sure that people power is in the face of the ruling elite, then they will listen. And we are going to make sure this movement, the Take Back the City movement, the Coalition for Homelessness and Housing Crisis, is going to make sure that you do listen and that protests will build houses. But look, I just want to bring you back about a week ago, when you seemed unable to finish a statement in response to our colleague Mick Barry. And in the exchange, you said that you believe this side of the House divides people. We create walls between those, you said, who pay for everything and don't qualify for anything, who pay for everything and don't qualify for anything, and those who. But you couldn't finish the statement. You got a bit flustered and you sat down, and that was good spin and good drama training that made you sit down, because I'm going to tell you what you were going to say is those who pay for nothing and expect everything for free. And you're referring to people who live in social housing. I grew up in a social housing estate, I'm sure as many other deputies did, and we paid our rent. We paid a differential rent according to the income that came into the house. Nobody expects a home for free. We grew up where people worked. Bus drivers, post office workers, nurses, cleaners, soldiers, the whole 9 yards of a society, and it was not a ghetto. And we are not about creating ghettos. But I'll tell you something, I want to ask you a serious question now. Will you instruct the deputies in your party, and I want to ask this of Micheál Martin as well, either support the motion this afternoon if you are a landlord, or abstain, because there are at least 30 TDs in this House who are landlords and who benefit, in no small measure I'm sure, from the subsidies which have grown to a shocking 700,000 million in this year, 700 million, sorry, almost £1 billion. And probably rising, and those who watch these things are forecasting that the subsidies to landlords will be £1 billion next year. I'll repeat my question. To all of the TDs in this House who are landlords, who have vested interests in being landlords, do not support this motion. If you're not going to vote for it, abstain. Otherwise, there's a conflict of interest that's immoral and does not fit with any pretence that you give a damn about the homeless crisis in this city.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Ceann Comhairle. First of all, allow me to say that I believe the protest is part of democracy. Provided protest is lawful and provided it is peaceful, well then it is welcome. And I have no truck or no objection to anyone taking part in protests to highlight important issues that affect our society, because they highlight issues and spur us on to do more to deal with them. And that's my view on that. Any protest that is peaceful, any protest that is lawful, is something that should be welcomed in a democracy, and certainly I do. What the Deputy tried to do there was a classic fallacy. If I did it, no doubt people would call it spin, but it's not spin, it's a fallacy. It's an attempt to put words in other people's mouths, to finish their sentences, or to do what they often do, which is to tell us what we think as if they knew. It's just classic fallacy. What I was describing, as she rightly pointed out, was her politics, which is to divide people. We don't want to do that. We want to create communities. We want integrated housing, and we want housing for everyone in society. Yes, people who are on housing lists need social housing, and yes, people who want to buy their own home should be able to do so. The average person buying their own home now in Ireland is in their mid-30s. That shouldn't be the case. It should be in their 20s, as was the case in the past. And as somebody who leads a government that believes in home ownership, we want to make sure that more and more people can buy their own homes, and particularly people in their 20s can afford to do so again. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. As I said earlier, we've put in place the biggest social housing programme in decades. Over 100,000 social houses to be provided over the next 10 years. This year alone will increase the social housing stock by 8,000, and that's people moving into those homes this year with their families. And we're building more homes for people to purchase. 20,000 new houses and apartments will be built in Ireland this year, up from 15,000 the year before, up from 10,000 the year before that. We'll build more new houses and apartments in Ireland this year than any year in the past 10, and we intend to build even more thereafter. So that is the solution, building homes of all types, because everyone, no matter where they are in our society, deserves to have a roof over their head, and that's what we want to achieve. And the ideologues and the people who are wedded to particular political philosophies aren't us. We're the ones who want to build new homes as quickly as possible, and we'll do them by any mechanism we can find.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Smith.
Long time since I heard the phrase classical fallacy. It doesn't often be used, but if I'm guilty of a classical fallacy, then I must be very rare, because the phrase isn't used very often. But this idea that we are attempting to divide is something that I really want to go back to when you tripped up with Deputy Mick Barry last week, and indeed in the past. Richard Boyd Barrett tells me here that in exchange with him, you clearly said that people cannot expect housing for free. And I don't believe that Fianna Gael and the ruling elite understand what social housing is, that they understand the notion that the state provides a safe, affordable roof over the heads of its population. And that's not happening. I'm just constantly being texted and contacted by people who are about to be evicted from private rental, and part of our motion this afternoon is no evictions into homelessness. Now, if you don't support that, then you are an ideologue. In fact, I know you're an ideologue, but you will prove it this afternoon when you refuse to support that motion. But please address my question. Will you instruct your deputies, who are landlords and who have a conflict of interest because of the massive subsidies being paid in RAS and in HAPS and in other leasing arrangements to the landlord class in this country, not to vote in this motion?
Thank you,
they are compromising themselves and your party, and indeed the Fianna Fáil party, when they do so.
Thank you very much, Deputy Taoiseach, to conclude on this.
I don't believe the Deputy is an ideologue, Ceann Comhairle. I believe she's a populist. And what do populists do? They present easy answers to complex problems. They replace emotion with reason, and they try to demonise and misrepresent their opponents. And that's classically what she's trying to do here. I lead a government that contains at least 2 cabinet members who grew up in a council home, and they're proud to have done so. And I also lead a government that perhaps in it includes people who are landlords. And bear in mind, landlords receiving rent supplement and HAP aren't receiving subsidies. They're receiving payments that provide housing for people who need it. And until such a time as we can build enough social housing to replace that, it's going to be necessary. There is a limited number of houses you can build in any one year. We'll increase the housing stock, the social housing stock this year by 8,000, but there are still going to be tens of thousands of people who will need to be accommodated in the meantime. And that's why we use mechanisms like rent supplement and HAP. It's not a subsidy, it's paying the rent for people who can't afford to pay the rent themselves. And that is a good thing.
Thank you. Taoiseach.